Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today. I do wish to announce that this Audit and Risk Committee meeting is being live streamed and recorded in accordance with the City's Live Streaming and Recording Council meeting policy. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the City recording and live streaming their image and or voice. I'd now like to call on Councillor Winmar, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin by acknowledging my elders past and present. This meeting has been conducted on my ancestral land. This is Noongar Budja. Ngalak ninin kulang kurang ngalak noich nijin Noongar Budja. Nongamut jerp and yining ninin ngalak kwabadak Noongar Budja kuralong. From the beginning of time to the end, this is Noongar country. Noongar people have been graceful keepers of our nation for many, many years. Jinajin karajin jerp and nijil wern Noongar Budja ngalamaya maya border. Look, listen, understand and embrace all the elements of Noongar country. This is forever our home. Kai wanjingan court jerp and nijin Noongar Budja dajli wangani Noongar Budja. Hello and welcome. My heart is happy as we're gathered on country and meeting here on Noongar country this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Winmar. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here, and before commencing the proceedings, I would like to acknowledge that we come together tonight on the traditional land of the Noongar people, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. Do we have any apologies this evening?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Matthew Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And is there any questions from the public this evening? No? Thank you.
I just need someone to move second the apology.
Oh, thank you. Mayor, will you move the apologies?
Happy to move.
I'll second. Thank you, Councillor. All those in favour of accepting the apologies? Thank you. Beg your pardon. Are there any petitions, presentations or deputations? None. And any declarations of interest, financial proximity, impartiality, both real and perceived, that haven't otherwise been declared or relate to this agenda? None. So moving now to item 7.1, the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 12th of December. We have a recommendation before us. Could we have someone? Thank you.
Happy to move.
Thank you, Mayor. And seconded. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. All those in favour? Nil against. We'll move now to the reports. Now they're in two parts and there are attachments, so we will need to move between those attachments. Could I please clarify the issue around there being some referred to as confidential? Has that been corrected? They're not confidential, so we don't need to move behind closed doors. Thank you. Moving now to the compliance audit return for 2022. Pass over to management, please, to speak to that
I'll
item.
pass that to the Manager Governance, Russell, who will give an overview of this compliance audit return.
Thank you.
Through the Chair, this report presents the annual compliance audit return for consideration by the committee before submitting to the Department of Local Government. So in summary, this is an annual audit by the Department of Local Government which measures the city's compliance against the Local Government Act. It's for the entire calendar year of 2022, so the 1st of January to the 31st of December. There's been one instance of non-compliance that we reported in that audit. The details of that non-compliance are that the an officer was late in submitting an annual return due to personal reasons. An annual return is a form that gets submitted annually by officers with delegated authorisation. under various pieces of legislation. They have to submit various information regarding their assets and income. The officer did submit an annual return. Unfortunately, it was late, which is reflected in the compliance audit return.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members with respect to the compliance audit return? Thank you. Mr. Arnold.
Cool. Through the chair, I just have a opening sort of question. Who completed the audit return? Was it an internal or sort of external process?
Through the chair, the compliance audit return is completed by the various teams that are responsible for those areas that the question relates. My team, the governance team, coordinate all those responses and present it to the exec before it comes to this meeting.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, I was just, I suppose, clarifying because reference to the audit, which generally has that sort of independence, objectivity, gathering evidence, etc. So, yeah, appreciate the clarification. Just had a couple of specific questions in terms of some of the items in the agenda. In the attachment. Just refer to page 14 of the attachment. There's a response under elections, which is the first question under elections. Refers to establishment of electoral gift register, and the response is sort of NA. Just wondering, it seemed like more of a process type question to me, so I was just sort of clarifying whether it was NA because there was no gifts or whether the process is intact.
Through the chair, that particular question received a not applicable because there were no electoral gifts to declare, so there was no register created.
Thank you. I suppose as I've read through it, a lot of the other areas had clarifications in the notes around to why responses were NA, so appreciate the clarification. Page 15 under finance references the first question around establishing an audit committee and then appointed members by absolute majority is NA, but it seemed like the substance of the question was that there was an audit committee, which we're sort of sitting in now, so just whether or not the response is NA versus a sort of yes, so just understanding the basis of the NA.
Through you, Madam Chair. In the comment, it actually refers to that the Audit and Risk Committee was established by an OCM on 27th of October. So it's saying NA because it wasn't conducted during that period when the compliance audit return is done, but we refer back to when it was done.
Thank you. Page 16, question 5. Where matters identified as significant reported in the auditor's report. It's NA, but there was one issue that in the IT space in relation to network access management that was significant last year. So just confirming whether it is a sort of yes or a no response, or what the basis of the NA was for that particular question.
Through you, Madam Chair. So we've had no significant findings from our audit reports which require us to inform the Minister. What that one's referring to is there was an audit done by the OAG on IT systems, which was not part of our audit process. They provided a report to Parliament, which we were not aware of, and of course the report also does not identify the councils. They are supposed to inform us of the need to provide a report through to the Minister if there's a significant finding, but there was a failing on the OAG part, which they acknowledged, and so that's why this one doesn't really apply. So it's more focused around the audit report.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Are there any further questions? If not, we have a recommendation before us to review the report and to recommend that Council adopt the Compliance Audit Return 2022. Could I have... Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. All those in favour? Nil against. Move now to Regulation 17 Audit. speak to this item? Thank you.
Through the Chair, this report presents outstanding actions arising from the City's previous audit under the Regulation 17 of the Local Government Audit Regulations. There's currently only one outstanding action. That action relates to a requirement to update the City's disaster recovery documentation and processes. That action remains ongoing. We have appointed Risk West now to conduct that for the City. They've conducted a gap analysis. They've also done a workshop with the appropriate staff members. So the next process will involve the creation of those documents. So this action will remain open and be reported to future meetings until it's finalised, which is expected to be likely the next meeting.
Thank you. Could we move to the screen for that in the appendix, please?
Page 28.
Thank you. So this originally came up 16th of June 2021. The due date, I'm assuming, is the 23rd of September 2023. Is that correct? Or was that the original due date?
The due date should be 23.
Right. So my question is, are we confident that we'll be able to have the disaster recovery plan as proposed completed by September 23?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, as the Manager Governance has identified, we've actually engaged a company, Risk West, to help us go through the development, the updating of the BCP. One of the first things that they've done is they've conducted the gap analysis. They've also done the workshops where they've gone through to identify the maximum allowable outage for various services, which we've now finalised that, and then they'll take that information and then start to develop that and updating the business continuity plan. And then obviously part of that will be the testing of the BCP.
Okay. So I'm very supportive of having this piece of work completed, certainly no later than September, because that will be 2 years since the original audit. Thank you. We'll go back now to the officer recommendation. That we note and provide comment where appropriate. Regulation 17 audit action report detailed within attachment A. I'm happy to move from the chair. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Winmar. All those in favour? And nil against. Moving now to the risk management report. Management, please.
Through the Chair, this report presents all strategic as well as higher level operational risks for consideration by the committee. In relation to the strategic risks, SR6 now combines two similar risks relating to the city's asset management processes. A previous risk relating to Bright Futures service has been marked inactive now that the service has ceased.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Arnold?
Through the Chair, just an overall comment in terms of the risk reporting. I think it continues to be informative and I think sort of iterative as well in terms of the improvements. I just appreciate in terms of the reporting that's sort of given and obviously there's a significant amount of work in this space. So yeah, that's just overarching comment. Had two questions. The first one was there's a number of sort of risks that have risk review dates either 18 months or to 2 years post their sort of their past review date. I'm just wondering in terms of expectation, is there a minimum standard in terms of performing that review? You know, typically risks, particularly of the higher nature, are reviewed in less frequent, like in terms of annually, for instance. So just seeking sort of comment in terms of the process.
Absolutely. Through the chair, high-level risks should be reviewed far more frequently, up to monthly in some instances. It's just a matter of maintaining consistency across the city. So education remains ongoing around these sorts of issues to get consistency across teams as to how frequently and how they're rating their risks. So it's an ongoing process.
Thank you. And just as I suppose a follow-up, just refer to page 34 of the attachments. It relates to the strategic risks of financial ratios. The last review date is September 21, with the next review date in March 2023. So it's, I suppose, an example where it's a risk that's manifested itself previously. So I guess it's just aligning expectations in terms of the review dates, which allows you to then monitor performance and making sure that those risks are reviewed in a sort of timely manner. And I think the sort of next risk is yeah, I suppose an example where you've done that sort of monthly process or more sort of frequent, but yeah, just as a reference from a system side, that may sort of help that process as well, and or putting hard stops in the system that a risk has to be reviewed within sort of certain frequency. And then one other sort of, or one final comment, just refer to page 38, which is strategic risk around work health and safety legislation. The last review date was in April 2022, and the next one is scheduled for June 2025. Quite a big time period there, particularly around some of the other agenda items in terms of the work health and safety legislation improvements. So I suppose just a suggestion in terms of reviewing that sort of fairly shortly, and obviously there's a fair bit of work in that space, so it's just updating the risk system with that, the sort of latest work or view.
Could we move to, thank you, any further questions, Mr. Arnold, or from other members? Could we move to page 47, please? So this is the one with respect to the Retirement Villages Act. And I just note the last comment there. The city does not have the financial resources required to comply with the proposed requirements. There's no funding allocated for asset renewal at this time. Are you able to update the status of that, please?
Yeah, so there is some changes in the legislation, so obviously we need to address that, but obviously a significant risk regarding asset renewals. So we don't have any asset renewals on that facility, so it's a large risk for the city. So the plan around that is to do a service review of that service and how we can adjust to those changes in legislation and that risk around asset renewals.
Thank you. And there's also new manning requirements coming in, staff to client numbers. I think that's in June, is that correct?
Through the chair, my understanding is it won't impact our facilities. That change to legislation applies to centres that provide actual care of patients, whereas ours is just an accommodation service. So that change to legislation, my understanding, is not applicable to the city.
Okay. Well, could we just confirm that that's the case, please? And if this facility, which I'm not familiar with, but if it doesn't require that change, then that would be useful to have that reported back to the committee. And if it does, then obviously we would need to move to a compliant situation. Completely independent, no. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
We'll absolutely check it, but
Yeah.
our understanding is it doesn't apply.
Okay, thank you. So it's really just the asset renewal situation.
Yeah, and I suppose with the change of legislation regarding exit fees for residents, that puts the city under some financial risk. So that's the reason we're conducting that review at the moment.
And when is that likely to be undertaken?
We plan to undertake that by the end of, probably early next financial year at this point in time. So I'd imagine we'd have that done by about September.
Okay, thank you. That's very useful information. Are there any further questions? Thank you for the clarification, Councillor. We have an officer recommendation, we provide comment, and also with respect to attachment A and B. Could I have a mover, please? Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Winmar, to second. All those in favour? Nil against. Work health and safety, item 8.4. Management care to introduce this item?
Through the chair. In the report covers three specific areas. The first area is around the statistical data and the new MyOsh system. At the time of producing the report, the data had not been migrated across from a manual system into MyOsh. I can now report that this week the data has been migrated. We're actually fine-tuning the data and actually testing the reporting. So we've got that in test phase. So for this particular report, there is no statistical report data. However, for the period of since the last audit and risk meeting, there were a total of 4 incidents, and one of those was listed as a first aid, and 3 were reports involving members of the public and requirement for city staff to report through to the police. Also included in the report is the strategic safety and wellbeing strategic plan for 2022-24, which has been reported through to the Audit and Risk Committee previously. The plan looks at 5 areas of safety and wellbeing, and there is inclusion in the plan of a traffic light system to give a bit of an overview of how things are tracking. Also, with respect to the new work and health and safety legislation, the city is working through all of our documentation. We have a detailed plan in place to make sure that we are compliant. We have 12 months since from the introduction of the legislation, which makes it the 31st of March 2023, where we have to have the documentation aligning. We are tracking to have that undertaken. A lot of work's been done in that space, and attached to the report is the Tier 1 document that is the first part that's coming through to the Audit and Risk Committee. Of note, in the framework, the changes have been the changes in the legislation around the relationship with the PCBU and the employee-employer relationship, and also the terminology of a worker, and the inclusion of psychological risks or hazards have been included in the Tier 1 document.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for that introduction. There's been a lot of work done in this area, so thank you very much for your leadership in that. Any questions, please? Mr. Arnold?
So through the chair, I suppose acknowledge the significant amount of work in this space in terms of preparations, and the traffic light report works sort of really well. Just quick clarification, in the Safety and Wellbeing Strategic Plan, it has a progress status in terms of 2022, and it notes whether it's complete or in progress, but then has 2023 and 2024. I think most of the actions are in the short term. Is there sort of plans to build out further actions and do extra work, or is that more just I suppose, a template?
So yes, there will be plans to continue with that. We'll be working through with our Work Health and Safety Committee to flesh that out as well.
Thank you. I had a couple of queries in terms of the further in attachment, not the policy framework document. Are we sort of taking those now?
Yes, absolutely. Let's move to that page. Do you have a page reference for us?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I was just double checking. In terms of the level of detail for the performance requirements. It goes into quite significant detail around how you're going to sort of monitor and you're setting expectations. I just had a sort of question around what's the process for tracking and monitoring those, because in terms of the expectation setting, it's sort of very clear around what's going to be sort of done. Is there like an overarching governance mechanism or way in terms of tracking that that those are actually implemented in reality?
Can you give me a page number? Sorry,
Yes.
Sorry.
So, for instance, sections 3.3, health and safety training, which is on page 90. So I think for each of the sections, it provides a similar format in terms of overarching, reference to the point, and then followed by key performance requirements. So that follows right through the document, and its key performance requirements are very sort of clear and succinctly written. I'm just wondering in terms of that monitoring process, how we sort of track those going forward.
Certainly. This is monitored by my team. We have a specific employee who looks after the training and development for the city. We have extensive training plans that document what training, what is required in terms of under their position descriptions, whether it's a compliance training, what we're doing across the organisation in all sorts of training space, when there's any certifications or requirements like white cards or those sorts of things. All of that is tracked and monitored, and we also have in our new One Council, we have a module that allows us to track that, which also allows us to produce reports, and those reports will be issued to, for example, across to our aquatic centre, showing all staff that need to do breathing apparatus training, all of that, when it's due, who are the preferred suppliers, who are the staff members, when it's due, when it expires. So it is very well monitored and also tracked. It also forms part of our training needs analysis that we do in relation to what training the city needs to undertake, and also how to be able to budget and finance for that training.
Thank you. I had a follow-up question. Just refer to page 95. So at the top of the document, it references a 3-yearly review, and then the second paragraph refers to being an annual review. I just want to confirm in terms of the timeline for the audit of the work health and safety management framework.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, of course.
The annual review is actually, the wording's incorrect. It's referring to the health and the strategic health and wellbeing plan. So the document that was before it, that is an annual review of that one.
And a 3-year review of the framework.
And a 3-year review of the framework.
Okay, perhaps that could
Thank you.
We'll
clarified.
we'll do a tweak.
Yep.
And then just a follow-up action in terms of the requirement for this. Would this be built into the internal audit plans, like in terms of this review, or be more sort of a management-led type of review?
So this, our framework is also reviewed on this is where I think the confusion has come, 3-yearly basis with an external provider, and we're audited against the WorkSafe plan. That audit is undertaken by LGIS, and so that is on a 3-year basis, and part of that audit is to look at our complete safety and wellbeing framework.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Any further questions from other committee members? No? Okay, thank you very much. There was some really thorough explanation of some very good papers, so thank you very much. The officer recommendation is before us that we note the city's safety and wellbeing strategic plan, and we also note the framework Tier 1 document detailed in attachment B. Could I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor. Seconded by the Mayor. All those in favour? Nil against. Move to the next item, please. The audit action update, item 8.5. Did you wish to introduce this item, Management?
Through the Chair, this report presents all outstanding actions resulting from internal and external audits. So at the moment, there are outstanding actions resulting from the recent internal audit of procurement and contract management by Paxton Group, as well as the 22 annual report.
Thank you. Questions, please? Mr. Arnold?
Through the Chair. Sort of question, we talked around the disaster recovery issue previously, but I didn't sort of note it as part of this sort of document, so I'm just wondering if you can refer to where that issue might be or whether it's excluded.
No, just for logistical reasons, all outstanding actions resulting from the Regulation 17 review were contained within the separate report. There's only one outstanding action, and that continues to be presented in the separate report, just for ease of reference.
Cool. Thank you. I suppose for follow-up, if in terms of completeness of audit issues, I suppose the introduction was around the completeness of all the relevant audit issues. So maybe just through the Chair in terms of including all relevant sort of issues, particularly ones that I suppose a higher priority or have been sort of overdue. Is I suppose just an overarching recommendation. So through the Chair, just one sort of final query, just refer to the attachments, I think page 137, which has a list of the audit action list and the working document. Sort of one query, and again, I suppose the suggestion is it's quite handy to have original dates as well for audit issues. I think whilst Target provides that relevance in terms of how sort of soon any of the revised dates have been worked towards, having the original dates provides additional colour as well, particularly when issues continue to be refreshed. So I guess that's a suggestion in terms of the template.
Yes, I think that's a good suggestion. Happy to support that for future reports.
And then last point, page 139. Maybe it's actually sort of 138, just the page before. Apologies. This refers to the annual report. So if you scroll up just a little bit, sorry, it includes not identified for risk ratings, but that's included within the audit report, whether it's significant, sort of, etc. So maybe it's just again for clarity and completeness, including those other bits of information which might be available.
So just on that, the no identified as opposed to the recording, not clear. I wasn't clear on that either.
Yes, because
through the Chair, if the information wasn't within the original report, that's why it hasn't been reflected in here. So the original report didn't identify an actual risk rating, and so I didn't transfer that information across. And when a target completion date hasn't been included, that's the same situation.
Well then, I'm sorry, Mr. Arnold.
So just as a follow-up, I checked the papers from the last audit committee meeting, and all the ICT audit findings had a sort of rating in terms of significance. So I guess, and whether it's a risk rating in terms of the narrow definition, or perhaps it's priority or another sort of non-risk related sort of component, just gives that sort of ability to look at the priority.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any further questions? We have an officer recommendation. I'm happy to move from the... I'm sorry, what was there?
that's okay.
Oh, okay. Happy to move from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Winmar. All those in favour? Carried, nil against. Developer contribution plans, quarterly progress reporting. management to introduce this topic?
Through the chair, this is essentially details of development contribution activity for the second quarter of 22-23, where we had quite a number of projects nearing completion, including our Nookbourne Maya facility and a couple of the other infrastructure items. It also shows quite a bit of activity with respect to contributions received, as you would expect. Prior to Christmas is always a flood of development approvals and clearances, which then mean that, you know, a number of lots are released to the market for the new year. So that in turn triggers payments for development contributions. You can see that those contributions are across a number of the cells. It's not specifically one or two, but they're generally east of the freeway or in the Mandogalup development cell.
Thank you. It was useful having the maps there as well. Any questions on this item? If not, we're being asked to comment and note this report. Thank you. From the Mayor and a seconder, thank you, Councillor Winmar. All those in favour? Nil against? Carried. So that concludes section 8. Are there any late items or items of urgent business?
I'll just do a quick brief after the meeting's closed.
Thank you. Are there none for the meeting? There were no questions on notice. If there's no other business, I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much for your attendance.